Welcome back to the Sports World with Patrick. Today we're diving into the fast-paced world of college club hockey with a very special guest, the University of Georgia's club hockey team or hockey team head coach John Camp. John has been making waves in the Southeast, and Coach Camp has been instrumental in building the program's competitive culture. We'll talk about the team's the challenges and triumphs of running a club program, and the growing hockey scene in the South. Plus, we'll get his thoughts on the future of UGA hockey and the sport as a whole. You won't want to miss this one. Thank you, Coach Cam, for coming. Obviously, you do have a lot of experience from high school and middle school, including Tier 3, Junior, and Junior B in the states, of course, of Pennsylvania, New York, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. And you are obviously now at Georgia. So, what sort of inspired you to get into coaching, and what led you to the University of Georgia's club hockey program?
Well, thank you, Patrick. I think coaching was the natural next progression for me once my playing career was finished at the competitive level. I did continue to play men's league hockey until I was 55, and then my wife, that was, I think, where she had enough, and I was forced into retirement on that side. But my schedule was getting hectic anyway with all the coaching and having a day job as well. I've always liked strategy. I've always, looked at coaching probably back when I was in high school as something I would love to get into. And I was just been very, very blessed, I would say, to be associated with a lot of good people in the hockey world who've given me an opportunity. And it's like anything else, one thing leads to another. I started out coaching middle school in Pennsylvania, moved up to the high school ranks. And then my career took me to a couple different locations. So Long Island was also one of the stops, and I was able to get into coaching on Long Island, which is a very rich hockey history, especially at the youth and minor level. Very good programs up there between the Goals and PAL Islanders, Junior Islanders. I did that. I was actually an expat for a year in the Hong Kong area, so I was fortunate enough I got to spend a year with the Cologne Warriors over there, and kind of as we've been growing hockey in the South, it was very similar for growing hockey in Asia, especially in the China Hong Kong market. Came back, relocated to Illinois, was involved in coaching there from Bantams, midgets, and then up to Northern Illinois club team. Relocated again, got in La Crosse, Wisconsin area with the Cooley region team, and then in Minnesota, was in Winona, and in Rochester. So I had the ability to really get a plethora of coaching, mentoring from some of the best at, between Long Island, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and even going back to the Pennsylvania market. Been very, very fortunate and blessed. And yeah, and then I've ended up down here at the University of Georgia.
And then obviously, I mentioned I did get to watch the game tonight or today against the University of South Carolina. And obviously, the culture there at UGA seems to be very, very rich. Right now, with the club hockey program, obviously in Athens, they are bringing along the Athens Rock Lobsters. Eventually, a new ECHL team there in Athens, Georgia, sort of to compete there with the Atlanta Gators. But you've gotten to see the culture for a while now at UGA. So, how do you describe the culture of UGA club hockey, and what do you think? What do you look for when you look for players when it comes to the tryout season?
Sure. Well, when I got down here, my job was another relocation. I actually thought hockey was over when I was relocated to Georgia. And lo and behold, somebody saw me walking out. I stopped into a gas station to get a thing of iced tea, and I'm walking out, and someone says, "Hey, you're a hockey guy." Because I had one of my Minnesota hockey shirts on, and I said, "Yeah, kind of. That's all over. I'm down here in Georgia now." It was hard for me because I was talking to him. I said, "This is the first year without hockey," and he said, "Georgia's looking for a coach." So I went and found they had a website, found they had a club team. Long story short, I applied, got the job, came on as assistant coach, and 2 years later, I took over the program. And we really had a true, what I would say, club team. What most people may think it was a club team. It was a lot of players who, recreational league level, 18 UAA, and then we had a wide gap. We had a couple players that played in the NAL, but it was really along those lines. And I really saw an opportunity at the time because the team a couple years prior to that, made an agreement with the local civic center, and it was a brand new entity in town, and they were looking for revenue generation, and someone came up with the idea of putting a hockey rink inside a big ballroom during the season. And when I got down there, they were drawing 2,500 fans for some of the SEC games, and I think like on the Sunday game where they were still getting like 800 fans, which for that level I was really impressed. Especially it kind of went against the misnomers of, hey, hockey would, can't work in the South. And when I saw that, I became really optimistic and really found a passion. Like, hey, said, hey, this next stage of my career, I'm in the fourth quarter of my career. What better to build a program, a hockey program at a Power Five school in the South? And here we are today, where the players, we have two teams on the men's side. We have one team on the women's side. The team I coach, the M1 team, most of my players are coming from Tier 2 juniors or straight out of high school, high level 18U AAA.
And then obviously throughout the season, you sort of have to keep players motivated. And I know with as little ice time as you guys get together besides the games, it's sort of hard to keep players motivated. So what are sort of the challenges of being a club hockey program and keeping players motivated during the season?
That's a good question. Quite frankly, from, coaching other teams and, where you're practicing every night and um, some mornings and nonstop. Here, education is the primary focus. It truly is student athletes. But I think that what I really recognized that we needed to do is make sure we build a really strong culture, because UGA is not an easy school to get accepted to. Every year it goes up and up in difficulty. I think this year's class, you're getting at you're in that 4.0 is like the median average now on a high school GPA, and you're looking at 32 to 34 on ACTs and 1350 to 1450 median on SATs. So as anybody knows, you're trying to find really good academic individuals who happen to be really good at hockey, and those are the ones we market to, basically, because they don't have aspirations of playing any level of pro, minor pro at all. They know they're realistic at this level, that they would have been identified a long time ago if they had, or NCAA D1 or, major pro skill sets. So they want to they see the opportunity to come here, get a great education. They see the culture. I've been doing this long enough now, and there's so many coaches out there that at the junior level and some of the premier high school teams, that they've helped me recruiting wise, because they see what we do here. We have what I call a 360 program, where we don't just focus on the hockey. We focus on the individual and taking these young men, in a lot of cases from teenagers to men. And we encircle that with a lot of different things, whether it's community service or bringing in people to run things like a LinkedIn class to help them prepare for going after internships and applying for jobs at graduation. Just a couple little things along that line that we do, really to add the benefit of being part of this program, being part of this university. If people come down here, they've got football, SEC football weekends. They've got Athens, which is historically a great college town. So the social aspects covered. The hockey box gets checked off. And then the academic, UGA is one of the top ranked schools in the country now.
And obviously, as I mentioned, congratulations on winning the game tonight against the University of South Carolina, 5-1. And so I do also, I sort of keep up with teams here and there. Been keeping up a little bit with the Georgia news since the new the new arena has been built, and the talk of, UGA possibly getting an NCAA Division I program. But beyond that, sort of just if you could give the insight on sort of how your season has been going and what have been some of your highlights so far.
Yeah, the season's going extremely well. We went into winter break undefeated. We were 12-0-2. Coming back from break, we were supposed to play two kind of warm-up games to get back in the flow, out-of-conference games with UNC Wilmington. But when they get a snow flurry down here, everything shuts down. So those games were unfortunately canceled. I was over in Europe coaching a selects team, so I wasn't here for that. But we had to regroup real quick when I did return, try to jam as much practice time as we could before the big Savannah Hockey Classic. And if you're not familiar with the Savannah Hockey Classic, it's our version of the Beanpot. It's four historic teams that came out of the club hockey roots: Georgia Tech, us, Tennessee, and Florida. And we won the first game against Georgia Tech 9-0, and then our fate caught up with us. We got knocked on our backside against Tennessee, a very good Tennessee team. And I think the positive and negative with that is if you're going to, when you're undefeated, you know that loss is going to come somewhere. As a coach, you want to find something positive to take out of it. And I think that was a wake-up call that we may not be as good as we actually think we are, and we need to sharpen the axe again for the second half in the playoff run.
And then obviously, you've gotten to see all your different teams in the 9 years that you've been a coach there. Obviously, you see the strengths and the weaknesses of your teams. Are there any some key strengths from this year, and what are really the areas you're looking to improve throughout the rest of the season?
Well, we have a very fast team, so speed is an integral part of our game, physicality as well, and then we have goaltending. We have basically a 1A, 1B tandem, and we have a freshman that we recruited heavily out of Massachusetts. Actually won the state championship in Massachusetts, so we're bringing him along slowly as a freshman. But the 1A and 1B tandem has been a real backbone for us, as any hockey player, hockey coach knows. I mean, you sometimes are only as good as your goaltending too.
And then, do you have any standout players this season so far that you keep an eye on?
Oh well, we have multiple players. That's another big thing that's I'm very happy about, because it's not just one line or two lines. I mean, we're solid through four lines. I've got guys that aren't dressing that would be dressing for some other teams. But, we've got, I can just go through some lines real quick. But Josh Maceros, the center. Like I said, we've got a 1A, 1B, and almost like a 1C right now. And then we have a grind line. So I don't really look at it from my hierarchy of 1 through 4. We've added a couple players, one player from the NAL, Evan Moore, Alex Larissy, NCDC. They've been a big boost for us. Last year, we picked up Ryan Bailey, who transferred in from NCAA. Again, coming in at this level, understanding that they could flourish and still have a good time in a very competitive hockey. I think they were even doubting that was maybe a step down from where they've played in the past. And if you talk to them now, they'll tell you this is far more competitive than they ever anticipated, and they're really enjoying it. And then you get down, my captain, he's, if you would call it the fourth line, I call it the grind line, Robbie Whitworth. Every team needs a grind line, and ours is very, very solid when we need to have an energy boost, or if we need to reset the pace or the tone. I'm not afraid to put them out there against anybody's first line. So that's a really good benefit that we have with them, that we can, it's like a Swiss Army knife. And then on D, I've got two seniors on the top pair in Leighton Poole and Alex Strauss. Jack Gannon, one of my Long Island boys, Luke Burnett from Texas, and then I've got the two Minnesota boys. I've got Truman, Hagen, and Bill Martin. Again, all solid. In that, Ryan Testino has been a standout. He had a shutout last night against South Carolina, and then Truman had the 5-1 win today against South Carolina.
And then, so I also, Coach Camp, I sort of want to ask this question because I know, when as you were talking, you guys were going into or out of the winter break, you guys were sort of undefeated, and you run to Tennessee, and I know that a lot of these students, because they're college students, they're also working on getting their degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And I know mental toughness is a big thing in hockey, because you sort of have to be mentally tough throughout the season. I know you guys, like I said, have very limited ice time, and I know in the South there's very limited amount of rinks. But how do you sort of teach that mental toughness when you go into a game? If you're coming, even if you're coming out of a loss, how do you as a coach communicate that to your leadership group and the players in general in the locker?
Yeah, well, we spend the first day before training camp. We'll spend we'll break it in a couple different sessions because I don't want to bore them to death with death by PowerPoint. But we sit down and we address our goals and we agree on those goals, what we expect for the year, what we expect from ourselves as coaches, but then we also outline what we expect from the players. And, it's everything from buying into the systems, committing to working out on their time, working out, so it works, because we don't want to impact their academic schedule by forcing things that they should be mature enough to do on their own, such as working out. Whether it's hitting the weights, doing cardio, making sure they're doing the nutrition right. But one of the things I started probably about 4 years ago was I brought in Vinny Maltz as a mindset coach, and Vinny's now associated with our program. But Vinny's also was hired this season by the Edmonton Oilers, so that's his full-time gig, and then he helps us out as he has times, or primarily does. He can do things with Zoom or on Teams with the team. So I'm very conscientious of the fact that mindset is crucial, and it adds another layer to where I said the base with culture. Then it's the mindset, and the mindset carries over to benefiting them from an academic standpoint too, because a lot of it is being the most efficient they possibly can be as an individual, from scheduling out their day to eating breakfast, working out, preparing for their classes, being in class, practice, having basically that whole day mapped out, and that discipline has really been embraced by the team. And what's good about it is when we travel, we make sure we have a conference room as part of our negotiated stay at that hotel. On the bus, we do, on the coach buses, we block out a section in the middle, and that's kind of a study area. Well, if we're on a 4-hour trip, which it seems like most of our trips are, first 2 hours are, put your headphones in, guys, and keep it quiet on the bus and let the guys study. And then once that's up, and then it's free to get the movies going or whatever. I think I've got a gambling problem with some of my players. The online betting and all the fantasy football stuff, but I think that's with a lot of the people that age group, and I say that in jest. They don't have gambling problem. It's really focusing on the individual being disciplined and understanding that this club hockey has changed so much. I mean, Nevada, Las Vegas knocking off Denver sent shockwaves through the hockey world, and letting people know at the school administration side that this isn't nothing against touch football or intramural basketball, but the hockey at this level isn't that far off from the varsity scholarship teams.
And then I also do have this question because obviously, in order to go 12-0 and 12-0 into the winter break, you sort of have to have a very very good team. How much does the communication how much does the communication between what you communicate to the players and what you communicate to your coaches and what to focus on during practice plays a key role. And then what about the leadership from your captains and all that? How much of the communication even between you and your captains and how they tell the team what to do over the course of the season?
Yeah.
How does that play?
Well, yeah, I can start. I think I mentioned early on, strategy, games, sports. That's one of the things I've embraced coming into coaching. I like to be prepared, so I spend a lot of time pre-scouting. Obviously, it's review, I guess, first on our team on what we need to be doing better and how can we keep enhancing what we are doing well. So that's kind of like the first breakdown of video, and then I translate that into drills for the next practice, and then it's the opponent we're going to be going up against, pre-scouting them and understanding what kind of systems they run, maybe some things I see that we can take advantage of, some things that they do very well, again, we have to be aware of. And then we kind of package that together for our practices. And I'm very fluid in making sure that the communication's there and discussion points with my coaches, And then we make sure, I'm very big on the team leadership controlling the locker room. That's their space, but I also put a lot of burden on, if burden's the right word, but responsibility is really the right word. A responsibility of making sure that the guys are ready to go and that we try not to have any surprises when practice pops up, because we have to be efficient with our time there too. This is what we want to accomplish. This is the goal, and go at it.
And then obviously, being a club program, you do run into a lot of challenges because it is a student based program and it's student funded. So, what are sort of the biggest challenges you've faced in running a successful club hockey program over the course of the last 9 years? And then I do also have this question. How does how does the team handle travel? And you sort of mentioned how you guys block out the first 2 hours to do, classwork and studying. And then, with the funding you guys get, I'm not sure how it works at UGA. I know I've had a few schools tell me, they have a lump sum that they will end up giving to the school, or not to the school, but to the program for funding. I know, because I'm here in Indiana at the moment, and I know in Michigan they have a certain amount that they give each club program. So I don't know if that's the same way UGA does it, but how does that compare to these NCAA programs who are getting the gist of all the funding?
Well, the reality of where we're at, we're in the land of football, and it's a bazillion-dollar business, I think, down here at the SEC. And the reality is, the SEC schools I've discovered, their rec or club sports programs don't really put a lot of money into it, and that's not a knock. That's just a reality of a fact. I was kind of shocked when I came here, based upon some other places I've coached, that it was really keeping it in that players were driving the games in their own car, 4 hours. I mean, to the point where I considered it from a risk management standpoint. I'm like, this is dangerous. I mean, if my kid was on this team, I wouldn't be thrilled about this at all. So I immediately went out to my connections in the hockey world and in the corporate world and pulled in some sponsorships and got ourselves grounded, started traveling by van, with the adults driving, and that wasn't good enough. So we kind of had to build into it. So I got the idea of, let's create a micro business. Let's see if I can put something together that I can take to the university and have this qualify for experiential learning, because we are going to teach these young men you put a player board together. You have someone in charge overall as a president. You have someone in charge of finance. You have someone in charge of community service, sponsorship liaison and whatnot. And we put this together, and it took a couple years, but we actually ended up getting approved to provide experiential learning credit. And with that, we went out and solicited folks to become interns for the team. And merchandise is a big income generator for us. So I didn't want it to just be people standing behind a table bored out of their mind. I wanted students who wanted to be involved in the design of the merchandise, the procurement of the merchandise, working with the folks at trademarks and understanding all those rules and regulations that you have to jump through to be granted the okay to, create, whether it's a t-shirt, hoodie, hat, all coffee mug, any of that stuff. There's a lot of regulations through trademarks. So we moved forward with that. And once it got up off the ground, we were very blessed to have some really, really smart, young, entrepreneurial students who weren't on the hockey team, but basically saw the advantage that they could learn and put to use some of what they've been learning at UGA into action. And we've built up to the point now, between sponsorships and revenue generation, we have a $200,000 a year operating budget. So we're basically starting from scratch each year on that. We do things like a golf tournament, which is a big infusion. At this point, we still have to charge dues. But with the new arena, quite frankly, I'm hoping we can get away, or at least significantly lower dues, because the arrangement we have with the new arena, it sits 5,500. We just finished our third game there since it opened. We had our first game there on Monday against Tennessee, which we did come back and um, adjust to, and we won that game. And then we just had the two this weekend with South Carolina. And based upon, I don't have the final numbers yet, but we're definitely in the black from attendance, and we get a share of the food and beverage profit as well. That's going to be a huge benefit to our team to help us continue to grow to the next level.
And then obviously, I know UGA, being in the SEC country, it's not easy to bring a hockey program over and make an NCAA Division One program. I remember, I don't know if you remember, but the University of Alabama in Huntsville used to have its NCAA Division One program. And I did work there for 2 years. I know, unfortunately, roughly about 3 to 4 years ago, they did shut the program down for good. And so, do you ever see UGA making that transition to the NCAA Division One level? And what would it take to happen? Is it something with this new arena deal, or would it have to be everybody in the SEC says, "Hey, look, we're going to go ahead and join the NCAA Division One level hockey," so that Georgia doesn't have to sort of go into a different conference to be there? And would you be coaching it at that?
Okay. Well, I'll start off by saying, what I'm allowed to say. Those discussions have been out there. Obviously, there's a lot of people in the hockey world that would love to see a school like Georgia, a Power Five school, a school in the South, become potentially that first Power Five school. The number one challenge that schools like Illinois, Pittsburgh, what we all know about most recently trying to get there is the funding for an arena. We've got that knocked out first. So the biggest problem has been addressed already is the arena. When when you get deep dive on this, then you've got the Title IX issues, and how that works. And then it's educating people that aren't necessarily students of hockey. Like I said, we're in an area that it wasn't a sport. It wasn't frozen ponds down here. I think maybe we had a few this past week, but if we get ice down here, it's a nightmare. But it only lasts for a day or two. So I think the reality is it's going to be a continued educating the people who are in high places who can push that agenda forward. But I can say that there are numerous people that are very positive about and love the idea of UGA becoming a Power Five hockey program in the South. The reality is, if you look at the NHL, if you had asked me when I was 16, 17, which was many moons ago, if, a team like Tampa would have a team, or a team would be in Miami or Dallas, or, I thought it was odd back then that Los Angeles had a team. I think that was probably the most non-traditional hockey market. And I used to wonder, it's like, can they actually form ice out there for 24 hours? But they have a hockey team. But now you look, they had the team in Arizona, which, we wouldn't have Austin Matthews if it wasn't for when the Coyotes were there. Multiple Stanley Cups in Tampa. And then you move up into Raleigh, the success the Hurricanes have had. You look at Nashville. But then you move down to the grassroots level, and, we see it this year with a team like Tennessee. Those youth programs that kind of kicked off with the Preds in town, they're all, college age players now. And you're seeing players at the AAA level going off and playing juniors, or going off to prep schools in the Northeast or whatnot. And you're seeing the same thing. I mean, there's a lot of players from Florida that are in the NHL, California, Texas. So the non-traditional hockey market is there. It's just now at the college level, where's that first big university going to be? And I think Georgia's probably got the best opportunity of anybody.
And then obviously we do keep mentioning the South is not really a traditionally hockey market. It's not really big. I do sort of keep up with the USA Hockey numbers and the amount of players that are in each state, and it seems very odd. But ever since the Thrashers have left Atlanta, hockey's still on the rise in Georgia.
Yep.
So how have you sort of seen the sport in Georgia, and with the presence, like you mentioned, the NHL's Carolina Hurricanes, and then of course the ECHL's Atlanta Gladiators, and now the up and coming Athens Rock Lobsters? How is that helping with the growth in the region for the South?
Sure. Well, I was pleasantly surprised when I came down here. I really didn't know what the youth hockey programs were like, and once I started investigating, I found out teams like the Chicago Fire that at one time had very powerful AAA teams, and a lot of those players again were poached by prep schools in the Northeast. I mean, not too long ago, one of the captains at Harvard was an former Atlanta player. And so some of those coaches go back as former players with the Flames, not even the Thrashers. And then you still have some of the folks that were associated with the Thrashers that are still in the area. Atlanta is also a area for just like myself, uh, with the corporate markets here. You have people being transferred here from the north, so you have a lot of the snowbird type situation where people with hockey pedigree are coming down here, and you're seeing that a major market. I mean, I think I'm almost positive Atlanta's going to get an NHL team again. I didn't really know the history behind the two failed teams, but when you start looking into it, you realize there was a lot of problems with the location of the arena. There was problems with the ownership. I think people realize now if they get the right ownership group in here and put an arena in the right location, why wouldn't it succeed here when it's bigger than all the markets I mentioned earlier?
Yeah, and obviously Atlanta having the two failed hockey teams, the only team that's really stayed there is the ECHL, and I believe the two SBHL teams around Atlanta have also sort of went under, which was pretty surprising for how big the SBHL is, and it reaches out into Illinois.
Hmm.
But I do also have this question because obviously, like you said at the beginning of the episode, you sort of didn't think that you would ever be able to coach hockey or even play hockey when you got relocated into Georgia. What would you say to young players in Georgia who might not think they have the opportunity in the sport at the moment?
Well, the opportunity is there. It's getting aligned with a one of the local rinks that is the learn to play programs. I mean, they're busting at the seams right now. I think hockey's a sport from an attention span. If you look at what the NHL is doing, and forgive me, I saw it when I was at the NHL offices, but they can mimic certain games where it's on TV, but then it's one of the animated Disney, I want to say cartoons, and age myself, but it's an animated series, and those players are mimicking what's actually going on the ice. So you're getting players in, the youth at a very young age, kind of seeing that, and NHL is pouring a lot of money into those type of technologies, and then you have the gaming side of all the NHL games that are out there, and then you see again when you're watching it on TV. If you're watching on TV, again the speed of the game, I think if all the issues that baseball's had by changing rules to make the game faster, well, hockey's I think the fastest of them all. And the constant line changes, and once people can understand the rules, it goes to another whole level. I think seeing things like the Olympics, it takes people into an interest of like getting to a rink. I think that's why figure skating's taken off so much too in non-traditional markets. Kids give it a try, and if they like it and they grasp onto it, they keep growing within the sport. And I see that taking place right here. We've got a group right here in Athens now that is having a blast, and I see them continually grow. It's the last 2 weekends in a row they've had tournaments here. I'm going into the arena, and right next to the arena we have an outdoor rink, um, and it's packed. It's packed with people.
And then I also do have this question for you because obviously you've gotten to, when you first started playing hockey, hockey was probably relatively very, very, very cheap. Um, but I do sort of have this question because I did see this a little bit on social media within the last few days. Sticks are now close to almost $500. Just starting off. You know, what are some of the ways do you think what do you think really needs to happen in order for the people who don't necessarily have $500 or $600 to put into a stick on a daily basis? How can the sport finally start to become cheaper rather than a very expensive sport?
Yeah, I'm cognizant of that, and I've seen something that the Nashville Predators have been doing and they've carried it down to the local rinks here, where they're putting little kits together, which are very inexpensive. It's got to be even below cost, where they get a stick, they get a player bag, the gloves, shin pads, shoulder pads, which really, I think that's what people need to do. I think it needs to be the equipment manufacturers and the professional teams who are looking to keep continuing to grow their grassroots base, investing in the youth and let them understand. And as they progress, you don't have to have the $500 stick, quite frankly, when you're 12 years old. I mean, that's just insane in my mind. You get up to this level, the college level and above, and the juniors. At that point, these sticks are being, twigs in the hockey world. They're being offset. We have deals with the major companies, so I can buy. I won't mention the manufacturer, but one of the twigs that goes for like $289, which is still a very good stick. I can get it for $90. So it shows you kind of the markup on those things. So it's like a good thing, bad thing. It's like, hey, great that you're making that kind of profit, Mr. Manufacturer. But on the other side, we know you can do it for a lot less because you're not losing money selling me the same thing for 90. So I think the reality is they've got to look and do the analysis of, do we come up with the starter package? Do we come up with the next level up package and make it where, again, you can grow the sport by investing in the youth? And as they progress, obviously the story changes, and then maybe you're going to continue to in volume make more money. I think it's basic business.
And then obviously you've been a coach almost everywhere that I can imagine hockey being very, very big. Um, and in Georgia, what are some of your most memorable moments as a coach?
Oh wow, I think it goes back probably one of my first teams at the middle school level in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. A very competitive hockey market. Winning that very first championship, I remember it was like yesterday. And as a coach, you're still coaching so many of the basics of hockey and the fundamentals of hockey. And when you see the player progress from the beginning of the season to the middle of the season to the end of the season, as a coach, that's really the win, right? You've seen the development, you've seen the improvement, but on top of it all, you see the confidence. Just they just exude with confidence at that point, because those little things, the tricks of the trade you're teaching them, it's sticking, and they keep getting better and better, and their confidence keeps growing. And a lot of those players back then, moved on to playing a lot of high level, ACHA hockey. I kept tracking their careers. Moving on, it's just been, it's from the geography standpoint, I've been around so many good people. But I got to say, most recent history has been the success we've had here. I've been fortunate enough to win 3 championships here. And there's nothing, that feeling, and I tell this to the players all the time, until you experience it, that feeling of joy is, you won a championship, but it's like, I think anything you earn today, because we're in kind of a participation trophy society, but when you worked your backside off, you put in the extras, you did everything you possibly could as an individual, but you did everything possible to be the best teammate. That's why it feels so good, because you put the time and the energy and the work in. It wasn't a freebie, and there's no feeling like it. I mean, again, it's such a natural high. I mean, just talking about it now, I kind of get all, I can feel it kind of like electricity going through me. It's just such a marvelous feeling. And when I won the first one here, that was special. But then as we kept jumping up to more competitive levels of play to where we're at today, it's just awesome. Because you're happy for the players, you're happy for the family. I know that this is going to be something that pays off for them in the long run. And I tell them this all the time. Life has a crazy way of driving us all to our knees. Nobody's exempt from it. I wish some people could be exempt from it, but that's not how life works. I think what sports teaches you, and I think hockey in particular, is how to rebound, how to get back your focus and go back attacking the day again, whether it's schoolwork, your job, your relationships you're in. I think there's just so many benefits you can gain out of hockey to carry you through the difficult times, because I think it's like hockey, just like anything else, it's just a game. But those values you gain out of it carry for your life. I mean, That's the thing I see. I think any coach you talk to on any of your podcasts, Patrik, is going to tell you the same thing. I think we take almost as much or more joy seeing them succeed once they graduate and succeed in life.
And then I do also have this question because obviously, starting off in Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia Flyers sort of had close to Aston, Pennsylvania. The
Hmm.
Philadelphia Flyers are sort of the big team there, even though Pennsylvania is sort of split up between the Flyers and the Penguins. Who was your biggest hockey influence growing up? And by any chance, was Herb Brooks one of those coaches that sort of inspired you to go into coaching with him winning the 1980s Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, Herb Brooks absolutely was. I was a student of Herb Brooks, way before Miracle came out. I saw that game live. I was, not to date myself, but I was in college, and the U.S. was going through a really tough time at that point. And as a nation, you could just feel we needed something to grab onto as a nation, and the 1980 hockey team did that for us. And when I saw how a bunch of college kids for different parts of the country, primarily, you had the New England group and you had the Minnesota, Wisconsin group, it was kind of like they're going against professional players. They weren't professional in name, but that Soviet team was professionals at the highest level. And, Tretiak in goal and, all those players. That's where, that miracle on ice was such a great tagline for it because it really was. I look at Herb Brooks today and him being a motivator, him being, everybody knows him for things out of the movie like, again, and doing bag skate and things like that. But really, he had a method to his madness beyond anything of bringing a team together of different backgrounds. His methods, I don't know how well they would fly today in certain areas because today's player is a lot different than the player back then. But again, I do look at anytime I have something I can read up and learn new. It comes from Herb Brooks. I'm the first to kind of dig into it. The time I was in Minnesota, that was another thing. I was like, I never thought I'd have the opportunity to be involved in hockey in Minnesota, being a non-Minnesota native. But I felt very fortunate to have that and be around. I would have hour-long conversations at the state championships with some of the old retired coaches in their 80s from up in the Iron Range. And I tell you what, I mean, I had a smile on my face and I just felt like I had been around, the gods of hockey and being inspired by them. Things like that I'll never forget. Yeah, I mean, going back to Pennsylvania, I was there for the first Stanley Cup when the Philadelphia Flyers won that. A couple of the players lived not too far from where I lived in Delaware County. Ed Van Imp and the Watson brothers were like literally right there. And where I actually learned to start playing hockey and skate was at a ice rink that Ed Van Imp opened up in Brookhaven. That's where the real start was. So between going there and learning to skate and the hockey and offsetting with street hockey taking off, my passion just took off at that point. It was an expensive game in correlation to today's dollars. But I tell you what, we played a ton of, the climate was a lot different then. So we played on, ponds and creeks. And I think I probably, learned more on my skating and just, getting out there and goofing with your friends and playing keep away and things like that. Um, but we didn't have a lot of money. And, we used to tell you a story. I tell my players this all the time. It sounds like the guy that walked 500 miles to school, but we would go to an appliance store in town, a bunch of the guys that really had a passion for hockey, and we would get the cardboard boxes and we'd cut them up, and we found an old pair of shin pads and shoulder pads, and we would actually cut and layer and bend them in a way that we made our own shin pads, and we would drill holes through them to make them lighter, and we would use laces to kind of keep them in place on our shins. And then we would do the same thing. We would kind of have elbow pads that were made out, we would take towels. I mean, it was really, I look back on it now, it's some of the most fun times I ever had, but with what little we had, we made the most of what we had. And it became kind of, we were thrilled when we walked past on the way home from school and go, hey, they got more, the appliance store has a bunch more boxes out there. We'd be running back and again, making our own shoulder pads, making our own, but that was the passion we had. And we made do with what we had.
And then if you could coach any NHL team for a day, which one would it be and why?
That's a tough one. Believe it or not, it would probably be one of the teams, Detroit Red Wings with Gordie Howe.
Yeah, I've been hanging around Detroit every so often, and I'm really happy with what's going on in Detroit. Haven't been to a Red Wings game yet, but I do know that they are building the Gordie Howe Bridge
Yeah.
over in Detroit, so that's gonna be another bridge. I'm definitely gonna have to go see it the day that it opens. So we'll see how that is. Well, that's Coach Coach Camp. That's gonna wrap this episode of the Sports World with Patrik up. I want to have a huge thank you to you, Coach Camp, obviously for joining us and giving us an insight into the UGA club hockey. It's clear that the program is in great hands, and it's exciting to see the growth of hockey in the South. If you're a fan of college hockey, be sure to follow UGA Hockey and support the team as they continue their season. And obviously, once again, Coach Camp, thank you for coming onto the Sports World with Patrik.
Hey, Patrick, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.